If there's one thing I've learned about memory, it's that it isn't a straight line. It's a circle, sometimes a trap. I keep finding myself circling back to her, even when I swear I've moved on. Her name was Claire, though saying it aloud even now feels dangerous, like opening a door that should have stayed shut. I met her in the most ordinary way, the kind of encounter you never expect to change your life. It was a bookstore downtown, a small independent place where the shelves leaned like tired old men. I was thumbing through a battered copy of Hemingway when I noticed her. She wasn't striking in the traditional sense. Her hair fell messily over her shoulders, her coat looked a size too big. But there was something in the way she read, lips moving faintly, as though she was tasting every word. I asked her what she was reading. She lifted her eyes, a shade of green I hadn't seen before, and smiled in a way that felt both warm and dismissive. "Something that will probably ruin me," she said, snapping the book shut. That was our beginning. It didn't take long before we were inseparable. She had this gravity, this way of pulling people into her orbit without ever asking. With me, it was more than that. She seemed to need me, or at least convinced me she did. I let her fill spaces in my life I hadn't realized were empty. Nights blurred into dawns as we drank too much wine, laughed at nothing, made plans that neither of us truly believed in. But looking back, there were cracks from the start. The first time she disappeared for a night, she returned with her hair damp and smelling faintly of cigarette smoke. She said she'd stayed with a friend. When I asked which friend, she smiled that same dismissive smile from the bookstore. "Don't be jealous. It's not becoming on you." It wasn't jealousy. It was confusion, suspicion, a gnawing sense that I wasn't being told the full story. But I let it slide. I wanted to believe in her version of us, the one where everything was spontaneous and passionate and free. Then came the night she woke screaming. Her voice ripped through the apartment like a blade. I grabbed her shoulders, tried to soothe her, but she pushed me away, trembling, gasping. "It was just a dream," she said, too quickly. She refused to tell me more, and when I pressed, she grew cold, retreating into silence. I should have paid closer attention to the signs. The sudden mood swings, the unexplained phone calls she'd take in the bathroom with the water running, the way she flinched whenever someone asked too much about her past. But I didn't. I told myself all couples had mysteries, and love meant letting some of them remain. The turning point came in the form of a letter. It arrived one rainy afternoon, no return address, the envelope damp as though it had traveled through storms to reach us. Claire wasn't home, so I opened it. The handwriting inside was sharp, angry, almost frantic. "She is lying to you. She always lies. Leave now before it's too late." My hands shook as I read it again and again. I felt like the floor beneath me had cracked open. I wanted to believe it was some cruel prank, some mistake, but a part of me knew better. When Claire came home, drenched from the rain, I hid the letter. I watched her shake off her coat, toss her bag onto the couch, and smile at me with those green eyes that had once disarmed me. But now all I could see was the possibility of betrayal, the outline of a truth she hadn't shared. I asked her casually at first about her day. She gave me vague answers, glances that darted away from mine. Then she came to kiss me, and I nearly pulled back, not because I didn't want her, but because I was afraid of what her lips might conceal. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I kept hearing the words from the letter echo in my head. "She always lies." And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure which scared me more. The possibility that the letter was right, or the possibility that it wasn't, and I was slowly unraveling into paranoia. All I knew was that my life had changed forever and I couldn't turn back. Not now, not with Claire at the center of the storm. The morning after the letter, I watched Claire move around the kitchen as though nothing were wrong. She hummed softly while pouring coffee, her robe slipping down one shoulder. To anyone else, she might have looked like the picture of serenity. But I couldn't stop seeing the words carved into my mind. "She always lies." She slid a mug toward me and smiled. "You're quiet today." I forced a nod, hiding the storm inside. Just tired. She studied me for a second longer than usual, her gaze sharp, then let it go. That was her gift. She knew how to walk the line between intimacy and distance, revealing just enough to keep me tethered while guarding the rest. For days, I carried the letter like a stone in my chest. I considered confronting her, but every time I opened my mouth, her laughter or her touch disarmed me. Instead, I became an observer in my own relationship. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way her phone buzzed late at night, the notes scribbled in a notebook she kept hidden in her bag, the occasional calls where she whispered so faintly I could barely make out words. Then came the dinner party. She insisted we attend. A colleague of hers was hosting, someone I'd never met. The apartment was packed with people who all seemed to know each other intimately, speaking in half sentences, laughing at secrets I wasn't privy to. Claire floated among them with ease, her hand brushing shoulders, her smile magnetic. But there was one man who kept watching her. Dark hair, sharp jaw, the kind of presence that makes the room bend subtly toward him. When their eyes met across the table, something electric passed between them, something I wasn't meant to see. I excused myself to the bathroom, but really I lingered in the hallway. I heard them before I saw them. Claire's voice, low and urgent, and his, calm but insistent. "You promised me," he said. Her reply was hushed, desperate. "Not here, please." My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give me away. I stepped back into the crowd before they emerged, pretending to sip wine while bile burned my throat. That night after we got home, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who was he?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "Who?" "At the party, the man you kept avoiding." She gave a short laugh, almost convincing. "You're imagining things." I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the memory of their exchange gnawed at me. The following week, I made the decision I swore I never would. I followed her. She told me she was meeting an old friend for lunch. I waited 15 minutes before slipping out and trailing her through the city. She walked quickly, her coat pulled tight, weaving through the crowd as though afraid of being seen. Finally, she ducked into a quiet cafe. I pressed myself against the window, my breath fogging the glass. There he was, the same man from the dinner party. They sat close, leaning in, their heads bent together. At one point, she reached for his hand, only to pull back quickly when a waitress passed. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, but something in me held back. Instead, I stayed hidden, watching the woman I thought I knew morph into someone else entirely. When she returned home that evening, she kissed me lightly and asked about my day. I lied, telling her it was uneventful, while inside I felt the ground shifting beneath me. That night I pulled out the letter again. The handwriting looked even more frantic under the lamplight. I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint smear of ink at the bottom, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry or afraid. I began to wonder who sent it, a friend, a rival, maybe even the man himself, and why warn me unless there was something truly dangerous at play. The next morning I resolved to find out. I searched her bag while she showered, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the zipper. Inside I found the notebook. Its pages were filled with scrawls, dates, names, locations, fragments of sentences that made little sense on their own. But one phrase kept repeating, "Don't let him find out." I snapped the book shut as she turned off the water. Guilt clawed at me, but it was drowned out by fear. That night as she lay asleep, I whispered the question into the darkness. "Who are you really, Claire?" Of course, she didn't answer. But in that silence, I realized I was no longer just a man in love. I was a man standing on the edge of something vast and dangerous, and she was dragging me deeper with every secret she kept. And the worst part, I couldn't make myself let her go. The night I found the notebook, sleep became impossible. I'd drift off only to jolt awake with fragments of phrases burning in my mind. "Don't let him find out. Find out what? Who was him? Every question I asked myself only split into more, and the answers were buried beneath Claire's evasive smiles. Days passed in a blur. I tried to act normal, to laugh at her jokes, to kiss her like nothing had changed. But my eyes betrayed me. They searched for cracks in every word she spoke, every glance she gave. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her detective, whether she knew it or not. One evening, I decided to follow her again. She said she was meeting a friend for drinks, and this time I trailed her more carefully, keeping my distance. She led me across town to a hotel, one of those glossy places where everything gleams a little too much. She hesitated in the lobby, checking her phone, then hurried toward the elevators. I stayed back, watching her reflection vanish into the mirrored doors. For a moment, I stood frozen, torn between confronting her and leaving before she noticed. In the end, fear won. I turned away and stepped back into the night, rain soaking my shoulders as if the sky itself was mocking me. Back home, she returned hours later, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. She curled beside me in bed, whispering that she'd missed me. I closed my eyes, pretending sleep, while a rage unlike anything I'd felt before pulsed in my chest. The next day, the second letter came. This time it was slipped under the apartment door, folded once, no envelope. My name was scrawled on the outside in the same frantic hand. Inside, she is playing both sides. You are in danger. Leave before it swallows you. My breath caught. Both sides of what? Who was writing these warnings? And why did the words feel less like paranoia and more like prophecy? I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to know the truth, even if it shattered everything. That evening I asked her straight out, "Claire, are you seeing someone else?" She froze, a knife hovering above the cutting board. Slowly she set it down. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because something isn't right. You disappear, you lie, you—" My voice cracked. "I saw you with him." Her eyes narrowed, but instead of anger I saw something else, fear. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand, it's not what you think." "Then tell me," I begged. "Tell me what it is." For a moment I thought she might. Her lips parted, her hands trembled, but then she shook her head violently. "No, it's better if you don't know." Better if I did know. The words burned. She left the kitchen without another word, and I stood there, the silence ringing louder than any confession could have. The following week was a dance of tension. We still shared a bed, still exchanged pleasantries, but beneath it all lay a fracture growing wider by the hour. Every time she left the apartment, my chest tightened. Every time her phone buzzed, I imagined it was him or someone worse. Finally, unable to bear it, I decided to follow her one last time. It was late. She slipped out quietly, thinking I was asleep. I waited a few minutes, then hurried after her, keeping to the shadows. She moved quickly, her figure darting beneath the streetlights like a ghost. She led me not to a hotel, but to the edge of the river. There, under the skeletal branches of a tree, the man was waiting. They spoke in hushed tones, too far for me to hear clearly. At one point, she pressed something small into his hand. He looked at it, then at her, and shook his head. The air around them seemed charged, dangerous. And then, suddenly, she turned as though she sensed me. Her eyes found mine across the distance. For a split second, the mask fell. Her face was raw, terrified, pleading. I stumbled back into the shadows, heart racing. By the time I dared look again, they were gone. When she returned home hours later, she said nothing. She slipped into bed beside me, her skin cold, her breathing uneven. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth right then. But something in her silence told me that the truth was larger than I imagined, something that could swallow us both whole. And lying there, my eyes open in the dark, I realized the most dangerous part wasn't her secrets. It was that, despite everything, I still loved her, and that love was pulling me deeper into the storm. The days after the riverfront encounter blurred into a haze of anxiety and obsession. I started noticing patterns I had missed before. The way Claire's phone lit up at odd hours, the hurried way she left for errands, the nervous glance she cast at every passing stranger. Every detail became a thread, and I followed them all, weaving a web that only tightened around me. One night I trailed her into a part of the city I barely knew, a warehouse district dark and empty, where the fog from the river rolled like smoke across the cracked pavement. She moved with purpose, a fluid motion that suggested familiarity. I kept my distance, sticking to shadows, heart hammering with both fear and determination. Inside the building, I heard voices, low, urgent, dangerous. Claire's voice was unmistakable, but there were others, men I didn't recognize, speaking in clipped tones, words I couldn't catch. I pressed closer to the doorway, straining to see. She was surrounded. The same man from the riverfront was there, tall, imposing, with a gaze that could freeze blood. Claire was speaking rapidly, gesturing with her hands, her face pale but resolute. They argued quietly, their bodies leaning toward each other as if negotiating something beyond my understanding. I realized then that I wasn't witnessing an affair or a petty lie. This was something far more complex, far more dangerous. Claire wasn't lying to me to hide another man's affection. She was hiding me from them. And yet, despite that knowledge, a part of me still ached with betrayal. How could the person I loved most in the world keep me in the dark so completely? I didn't move. I stayed hidden until they dispersed, Claire slipping out through a side exit while the men stayed behind. She didn't notice me, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she avoided leaving traces. By the time I got home, the city felt different, thicker, heavier, as if the night itself had conspired to trap me in her secrets. The following morning, she kissed me as if nothing had happened. I wanted to ask, to confront her, to demand truth, but my voice failed. Instead, I watched her pour coffee, watched the sunlight catch her hair, and felt the cruel truth. Love can bind you even when fear should drive you away. That week I pored over the scraps of evidence I had, notes, glimpses of meetings, fragments of conversations. Patterns emerged, though always incomplete. Dates, times, locations. A hand's movement here, a glance there. The more I understood, the more I feared what the full picture might reveal. Then came the message. A single line texted to my phone while Claire was out. Stop following her. You're in over your head. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I stared at the screen until it went dark, feeling a pulse of fear that was both intoxicating and paralyzing. That night I confronted her, not about the message, not about the meetings, but about the unbearable silence between us. I can't keep living like this, I whispered. I need to know the truth, everything. Her face tightened. For a moment I thought she might finally speak, but instead she took my hands, held them close, and said, "Some truths are too heavy. You can't bear them, not yet." And just like that, she left me suspended in uncertainty, the weight of her secrets pressing down like a stone in my chest. Days turned into weeks, and I became both lover and prisoner, ensnared in a game I didn't fully understand. Every time she left, every time a new shadow appeared in our lives, the question returned, gnawing at me. Who is Claire really? By then, I realized I didn't even know if I wanted the answer. Some mysteries, I understood, are more dangerous than any betrayal, and loving her had placed me squarely in the path of danger I couldn't see, couldn't anticipate, and perhaps couldn't survive. Yet I stayed, because by that point leaving was no longer an option. My heart had been claimed, willingly or not, by a woman whose secrets were deeper than the city we lived in, and I had no choice but to follow wherever she led. It all came to a head one rainy night, the kind of night where the city smells of wet asphalt and regret. Claire kissed me on the cheek before slipping out, murmuring something about a late meeting. But there was tension in her shoulders, a careful precision in her steps that set off alarms in my chest. I knew, instinctively, that this night would change everything. I followed. She led me through the deserted streets to a warehouse by the river, the shadows long and menacing. Inside, I could see the flicker of lights, the silhouettes of men, their postures tense. My heart slammed against my ribs as I pressed against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was witnessing. Claire was there, speaking with authority I hadn't imagined she possessed. The man from before, tall and severe, leaned in close, whispering in her ear. Other figures stood around, faceless in the dim light, their presence threatening. She handed one of them a small package, and his eyes widened. I realized then that I wasn't witnessing a simple secret affair. I was watching a dangerous world she had never allowed me to glimpse. She was protecting me in ways I couldn't understand, and yet the danger now included me by default. Suddenly, her eyes met mine across the warehouse. For a split second, her face broke into something raw: fear, regret, a plea I could almost hear. Then she disappeared from sight as if she had never been there. I didn't follow. I couldn't. My mind reeled, imagining every possible outcome, every terrible possibility. When she returned hours later, rain soaking her hair, she crawled into bed beside me, shivering and silent. I reached for her, but she flinched, pressing a hand against mine. "You shouldn't have followed," she whispered. "It's not safe." "What is happening?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. She turned to me, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're part of it now, whether you want to be or not. Some truths, they'll destroy you if you see them." Her words landed like stones, heavy and immovable. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she told me everything. But fear and something darker, love, kept me frozen. Then came the sound of movement outside, footsteps heavy and deliberate. My stomach dropped. Claire jumped up, grabbing a small pistol from under the bed. "Run," she hissed. The door burst open. Men stormed in and chaos erupted. Shouts, the glint of weapons, the smell of gunpowder. I tried to reach her, but one man lunged toward me. Claire fired, and the sound cracked the room in two. One of the men fell, clutching his side, while the others retreated into the night. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. Claire grabbed my hand, dragging me through alleys, over fences, toward the river. Rain soaked us to the bone, but neither of us slowed. When we finally collapsed against the bank, gasping for breath, the world felt both immense and claustrophobic. She pressed the gun into the water, her hands trembling. "You should have stayed away," she whispered. "I couldn't," I said, my voice shaking. "I love you." She stared at me, a complex mix of grief, fear, and relief in her gaze. "Then trust me. We run and we don't stop, not ever." And that's what we did. But here's the truth I carry now. I don't know if she saved me or doomed me. I don't know if our love was real or a beautiful trap. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face that night, defiant, terrified, drenched in rain, and I know I would follow her again, even knowing the danger. Because some loves are not meant to be safe. They are meant to consume you, body and soul, and leave you changed forever. And Claire did exactly that.